All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this information session for WCA Foundation's Spring 2023 grant round, which just opened last Thursday. I am Julia Ruther, Program Coordinator for Impact and Collective Giving at the Minneapolis Foundation. My primary responsibility in this role is to support WCA Foundation's grant making and member experience work as part of the Minneapolis Foundation's overall collective giving programming, which includes giving circles and other community advised funds. So really pleased to have so many of you joining us for a little bit deeper insight into WCA Foundation's funding strategy and review process. I am joined today by two other presenters, Erin Elliott, who is a WCA Foundation member and is the grants chair on the advisory board. You'll get to hear a little bit more from Erin about her role here in just a moment. And then my colleague, Takara Henniger, joins us. She is grants coordinator for the community impact team at the Minneapolis Foundation. So during our time together here this hour, we'll walk through grant guidelines and eligibility, WCA Foundation's member-led grant review process, and also the application submission process through the Minneapolis Foundation's grant portal. We'll hold 10 minutes at the end to answer a few questions from you all. So as we're moving through our slides, I encourage you to drop questions in the Q&A feature here in the Zoom screen. And for those questions that we don't have the time to specifically address, I will follow up with those of you who dropped them in the Q&A chat, and then certainly a broad encouragement for all of you. Please reach out to me. I am holding time and space for one-on-one 15-minute info calls to answer any specific questions that you might have, either as follow-up or that don't get answered today. All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and let's dive in. Erin, take it away.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks, Julia. Again, I'm Erin Elliott, and I've been a WCA member since 2018. And I really joined the WCA Foundation to be closer to community, the people engaged in the work, and the organizations that were really serving and impacting women. And I'm really motivated as the grants chair of the WCA to look at our grant making process and really align it with our new strategic framework that's really focused around trust, engagement, and responsiveness. So I want to just take a few moments to ground you in who the WCA Foundation is. The WCA Foundation was founded in 1866, and it has a robust history for more than 150 years of supporting women in Minneapolis and the surrounding suburbs, which is pretty amazing. I mean, 150 years. So in 2020, the WCA transitioned from a private foundation to partnership with the Minneapolis Foundation as a signature fund. So today, the WCA is a member-led grant-making organization, and it's led by a group of volunteer women who come together and learn about issues affecting women in the Twin Cities, review grant proposals from organizations addressing those needs. And we host 2 grant rounds in the year, one in the spring and one in the fall. So what does it really mean to be a member-led grant-making organization? So our members have the opportunity to do everything from setting the strategic direction of the organization, determining funding guidelines, reviewing the proposals, engaging with organizations, and really ultimately making these funding decisions. So our partners at the Minneapolis Foundation advise and administer our grant-making work and support our member learning and engagements. And I hope you noticed in the RFP that we just approved a new strategic framework. So please take a look at it. Members are really going to be using this as a tool to provide guidance as we explore and evolve our approach as grant makers. And our role as facilitators of community-directed solutions and our impact on women.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Now we'll dig into the basics of this funding opportunity. WCA Foundation will consider requests from 501c3 nonprofits based in the Twin Cities, 7-county metro area and serving and supporting women in this geography. So this means that WCA doesn't fund individuals, private foundations, fiscal agents or fiscally sponsored organizations, or 501c4 entities. The organization or project submitted for consideration must provide direct services to women ages 18 or older. Services really targeting women 18 or older. And of course, must be, again, based in the Twin Cities metro area, that's 7-county metro. For organizations applying, you may submit one request per funding cycle. If you submitted a request last cycle and were declined funding, you are eligible for consideration again. So you may apply in the next grant cycle. There's no waiting period. For our grantee partners who have received funding recently from WCA Foundation, we just ask that you wait 12 months from your last submission date to submit another request. So if you applied and received funding in the spring 2022 grant round, yes, you can submit an application this grant round. If you receive funding for us for an application that was submitted last fall for the November deadline, you'll need to wait another cycle before submitting a request for consideration again. There are further eligibility considerations to note. The list here that I have in this slide is shortened a little bit for clarity from the complete list of exclusions, which are included in the preview document that's linked in our RFP, and that we'll also drop a link to in the chat. The two exclusions that I really field the most questions about and that come up, I would say, have come up recently in membership discussions around eligibility are the last one on this list. So we exclude funding for requests for pro-life or pro-choice projects. What this looks like, I'll give you an example, is that WCA has made investments in a community embedded health advisor program at Planned Parenthood in recent years. This is an eligible program request that we have funded, but we would not consider a general operating request or a program request specifically for clinic services at Planned Parenthood that include abortion services. So the specifics of the request and the request type are really critical in this space. The other exclusion is the second bullet there, to religious organizations for religious purposes. The key here lays in whether a program or organization requires compulsory attendance in religious services or observances as part of the program seeking funding. So for example, if a program requires that its clients attend church services to receive the sort of other support elements of a program, then that's ineligible for WCA funding. If the program is hosted in a church facility, however, but does not require any kind of, attendance in church services or prayer or other sort of religious participation in order to be a part of that, the program, then we'll consider that request. So again, this is a space with this list and really in all places that I really want to encourage you to reach out to me directly. I have time for you and for your questions one-on-one, but just wanted to highlight these here. So to sort of summarize, WCA WCA invests in women-focused organizations, initiatives, and projects that deliver targeted support to women 18 and older by providing direct services addressing basic needs. In this funding strategy, the WCA members have identified 5 priority focus areas: economic stability, education, health, safety, and shelter. A newer element of the application is a prompt that's going to ask you to choose which of these 5 focus areas best fits your request. We recognize that choosing one of these is often a hard choice because your work straddles so many of these areas, really taking holistic approaches. So we're really asking for sort of the best fit, not the only fit. We're really just using this as a way to help you, the applicant, tell us the story of how you are aligned with our funding area, and really helps us kind of organize our process. So, as you're thinking about what's the translation of these eligibility criteria in the membership's review and decision making, the best place to look at that is really at our recent grantee list. So we'll put these links here in the chat, but those lists of recently funded projects and organizations are going to give you a great snapshot and some insight into the types of requests that members have chosen as most strongly aligned with the funding strategy right now. Erin, I'll turn this one over to you.
All right, thanks, Julia. So the WCA considers both general operating and project-specific requests. So the available funds for each cycle is approximately $450,000. The grant size can range anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000. And on average, the grants awarded each cycle are between 15 and 20. And so for general operating requests, the mission alignment of your organization is critical. If your mission centers on supporting women, a general operating request could be a great fit for you. If your mission of your organization is just a little bit broader, we advise that you submit a project request, providing an opportunity for WCA to invest in the work that provides a targeted support for women. With that said, we strongly encourage organizations considering general operating requests to reach out to Julia. As she said, she is more than willing to talk to you. She offers those 15-minute slots to really personalize any questions you have around this. We just really want to avoid having your request not be as strong because of the request supported. So please, if you're considering general operating, reach out to Julia.
Awesome, thank you. So here's a snapshot of the architecture of WCA's grant review process. So there are 3 phases. The first is eligibility, and this is really to confirm complete requests and eligible requests among those that we receive. The second phase is strongest alignment. This is where the membership reviews and determines which are the best fit right now with the available dollars for the grant round, and really where the big decisions are made collectively about which requests are going to advance to that third and final phase, which is site visits with members. Our members are hosting these site visits with our final request applicants. A note on member-driven process, collective giving processes. These are volunteer-driven decision-making And it really involves what you might call a more traditional timeline from application submission to funding, which is just to say it takes longer. Go alone to go fast. And with more people, things take a little bit longer. So let's talk about timeline. Here are key dates for you, interested community organizations applying for funding to take note of. The deadline, this is a big, important one, Thursday, May 4th. Takara is going to talk with some more specificity around the deadline, but just want to make sure that you understand that this is a hard, fast, no exceptions deadline. So August 4th, by this date, we will have moved through phase 1 and phase 2 of that review process we just looked at. Applicants will be notified either that you've declined funding at this point, or that you're advancing to that final third review with site visits. For those organizations that have been notified that they're advancing to site visits, you should receive an email or a phone call from a WCA member by that September 12th date, so that the process of scheduling site visits and coordinating those is underway by mid-September. Site visits, then will start after that initial decisions are made. So mid-August, mid-September, those start going through October, and funding decisions will be made on a rolling basis in time with those site visits. The advisory board meets monthly to approve the recommendations that come out of those site visits. So all of those final applicants in that third phase should receive the funding decision by that December 5th date. So before I turn things over to Takara, I want to just leave you here with the mission of WCA Foundation, Women Changing the Lives of Women. This really serves as the North Star in the member review process as our members are reading and reviewing and really investing their time and care in your requests, that this is really guiding what they're seeing as the strongest fit for WCA investment amongst all those other criteria. So I am going to turn it over to Takara.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Takara Henniger again, and I'm the grants coordinator for the community impact team here at the Minneapolis Foundation. So I'm going to walk you through how to actually apply in our online portal. So a few important things to remember is that all applications must be submitted online. And I'll show you exactly how to do that here in just a sec. You need to register yourself and your organization in our online portal. Our online portal is set up so that there is a main organization account, and then there are individual accounts. And that is helpful if you have 2 staff or 20 staff. We really encourage each individual that will be using the online portal to actually create their own account. I'll show you that as well in a second here too. What's important to know is if you haven't already registered, what you'll want to do is you'll want to register as soon as possible. This is a 2-step process. So after creating your account, you'll actually receive a confirmation email, which will provide additional instructions. Please look for that second email. If you, for some reason, don't get it, you can always reach out to the grants administration team here at Grant Support at Minneapolis Foundation. But just to reiterate, it is a 2-step process. And then to that point, please start early. So we don't at the Minneapolis Foundation have 24-hour grant support. So starting early is going to be key to a successful submission of an application. The other thing, as Julia said, to reiterate, is that May 4th at 4 p.m. is the deadline. And again, there's no 24 technical support. So make sure you start as early as possible and go ahead and get registered or log in to make sure that that works out for you. So I'm going to now walk you through quickly our process. Okay, so the first step you'll want to do again is register, but to do that, what you'll want to do is come out here to the Minneapolis Foundation website. What you'll want to do is you'll want to click log in. Once you do that, you'll get to this page here. So I'm going to stop for a second here at this page. If you are already registered and have filled out applications with the Minneapolis Foundation, what I would encourage is that, again, start early, log in, make sure that you can log in. And also what I would recommend is if you've had changes at your organization, to reach out to the grants administration team as soon as possible so that we can go ahead and get your account updated. If you are new and have never registered, you'll again have to register. And once you do that, and you can find that right here, new to our portals, go ahead and click there. Once you do that, this is the instructions. Again, it's a two-step process. So if you go and you register and then you're unable to log in, it's because you want to check and make sure you get that confirmation email, which will then give you instructions to actually connect yourself to your organization. Once you have logged in, what you will do is you'll either come to this page. Some people have access to all of these tabs here at the top. The one that you'll want to find is the application portal here. You can also find, so once you go to the application portal, you can find WCA's application right here. You'll want to go ahead and click that. And once you do, it will take you to this page. This page reiterates all the guidelines, some of that specific information about applying. And then it also has a link to the funding eligibility and exclusions, as well as the application preview. What I will say is if you are using the application preview, know that it is as closely aligned to the actual questions on the application. But again, get into that portal early and quickly and start messing around just to make sure that you submit your application with the number, characters and all that early and test it out. So I have a few more tips and then I will go ahead and hand it back over to Julia. I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay, so these are my final tips. Again, I've already kind of said these tips, but if you already have an account and you need to update anything, please reach out to us as soon as possible to get those updates made. We use a two-factor authentication for security purposes. So once you use a phone number is what you'll use or email address, make sure that it's one that you always have access to. Again, we don't have 24-hour support. So if you set yourself up with one that is at your office or somewhere where you can't reach it, it might be difficult if you're to that last hour of submitting your application to get into the system. And then also, again, we encourage everyone to set up your own account. So some organizations say, well, I want to only have one account for our entire organization. No, if there are 20 people using the account, please have each person that will be touching the online portal to actually set up their own account. And then I think the only final thing is that once you have submitted your application, what will happen is that you'll receive an email confirming that your application has been submitted. Again, if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. The contact information here is in the chat and it'll be on the website and in all other places for the grant administration team. Julie, I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Great, thank you. Yes, absolutely encourage you all. Again, just like me, reach out to me with those questions around eligibility and whatnot. But certainly as you're getting in there early, you know, Takara may not be on 24-hour support, but she's very accessible in the weeks leading up to these deadlines. And so would encourage you to ask any questions that you have about the portal. So I think we will open it up now to some questions that have come into the chat. So Takara and Aaron, if you want to join me on the screen here, that would be great. We have got let's see. So the first one, what do you mean by direct services? And when do we have to submit what we used our funds for? These are great questions. So for direct services, what that means is that the organization or program is providing services, direct to clients. What this generally means is what it's not, which is advocacy work, research, those sort of things. We're looking at that sort of frontline, direct to community support. For your second question, which is also a great one, when do we have to submit what we used our funds for? So for those organizations that do receive funding from WCA in a grant round, we currently do not have any required final reporting. So we are really leaning in, as you see in the strategic framework, into this trust-based philanthropy model. So at this time, there's no final reporting. What this does raise for me, however, is something that I did not say earlier, but what I would want to emphasize is that for each, what does a complete request look like? Well, you'll see there are required uploaded documentation that goes along with your request. And so two really key elements, if you are submitting project-specific request, is your organization budget and then a program or project budget, depending on what you're specifically seeking funding for. And so the strongest of those project and program budgets are really going to be the ones that clearly outline the activities that you've told us about in the narrative, that we see the budget behind that work. And so, from a review perspective, connecting those dots, understanding that the work that you're seeking to do clearly looks like will be supported by the investment structure demonstrated in your budget, is really important. Another note that I'll just make as I'm thinking about this budget piece, WCA Foundation is a one-time funder, right? This is a one-time investment. And so in your narrative and in those supporting documents, really helping our members, your grant reviewers, understand why this funding for this work now is important, because the understanding is that you may not and likely would not have WCA Foundation support next year, right? So the timeliness and the clarity about how WCA funding plays into your overall funding structure is important. So again, in either your organization or your project budget, depending on what kind of funding you're seeking, showing the other funders that are either pending or secured along with WCA are important. Members tend not to be inclined to invest in requests in which WCA is the only funder. So it's important that your budget helps to tell that story. Let's see, so thank you so much for those good questions and triggers for me to share some other insights. So the next question, I'd love to learn more about what reviewers are specifically looking for during site visits, particularly for groups that do direct services in community. I'll start this question and then Erin, jump in. Again, in the review process, one thing that we recognize is that the time between submission and these site visits, there's some months in between there, and we know that the work of community organizations is not sort of happening over the course of the month, but you're really responding to community on a daily basis. So we see these site visits are really primarily relationship building. We see them as opportunities for our members who are really looking to learn more about the work that has been identified as the strongest aligned at this point. They're excited about your work. They feel a real affinity between what WCA is looking to do in terms of impact with their funding and the work that you're doing. So we want to emphasize that first, it's really relationship building, but it's also an opportunity for you as an organization to keep us up to speed about anything that's important to note that may have changed or that may look different, just so that we're really understanding at the time of investment where things are at in community in terms of what you've requested. Erin, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, thanks. The site visits, I always say it's a conversation. This is where your proposal really gets to live off paper, and it's really a time for our members to learn about success stories. What does that look like? How is your program impacting women? And to hear those stories about women that have, utilized services and they're, just the impact. And it really is that time for members to learn, like Julia said, about your organization, about what your goals are, about what you're doing. I mean, we already know you're doing fantastic work. It's just this opportunity to really learn more about what are you seeing in the community? What are some trends around, what you're doing and the kind of work you're doing? So we really appreciate that time with you, is to kind of just learn more, hear more, and just that kind of, again, that proposal to live off paper, just that face-to-face relationship building.
Absolutely. Let's see. This next one is going to be for you, Takara. There's a question that says, okay, there's one login for Minneapolis Foundation's grant portal, but we might have multiple applications to different funding opportunities inside there. Is that right?
Yep, that can be the case. We really at the Minneapolis Foundation don't go, you applied for one, don't apply for anything else. But it is the same, it's the same portal, it's the same online portal, and it's the same login information. So that's why it's really important that if something has changed or you updated your account information, that you go ahead and reach back to us. And that's also why it's really important. You have larger organizations or different organizations where they might have 5 different people submitting applications for different things. Make sure that each of those individuals have their own account, and then that way they're able to log in and log out. If you are applying to multiple things too, I believe once you're inside of the portal, you'll be able to see those other applications. And that's one last thing I want to hit on with that is that when you're logging in and you want to go back to an application that you're doing, where it says WCA Foundation, it also says, or Spring 2023, it also says My Applications. You can actually click that, and what it'll do is list all the applications that you're working on. So if you're working on 5 applications, go there, and then that way it'll get you back to the actual application that you're working on at this point in time.
Thanks for that question. Let's see, with one-time funding, does that mean that organizations funded in the past should not apply again? This is a great question. So no, we welcome requests from organizations that we have been in grant partnership with before. You will see in those recently funded organizations list, perhaps, that there are some repeat funding in the decisions that we make round, or the members make round from round. We want to emphasize, however, that it's an annual basis that we grant things, and that so just in terms of a commitment, right, to say if you've been funded once, the next year build it into our budget because we're building this relationship with WCA Foundation. We do not advise that, right? We are really, certainly in the last grant rounds under the partnership with the Minneapolis Foundation, we have seen an increase in the requests that are coming in each grant round. And so I just want to emphasize that, as you all know, working in community, there are a lot of needs in these big, broad spaces serving women in community. And so the funding rounds are competitive. So we only emphasize that just to understand that if you've been funded before, that there isn't a sort of weighted point, so to speak, in our review process that says that we either do or do not sort of privilege organizations that have been funded before. Relationships are important to us, and we recognize the dynamics there, but want folks coming in clear-eyed about that. So we'll take one more question here. Let's see, with our time. Let's see, we've got a question. Would you be able to say more about an organization that predominantly serves women but also other genders? Yeah, absolutely. This is a question that we get a lot. This is really where that distinction between general operating funding and program or project specific requests is really important. For general operating funding, I'll reiterate what Erin said earlier. We're really looking for mission alignment, which is to say, if your organization is dedicated to supporting women, then a general operating request could be a good fit, right? If your organization has a broader mission in which you have multiple different types of programming serving community members across age and gender demographics, we would encourage you, if you provide women-specific services, to request funding for that work specifically. Bring us a project or program that's targeting women and let us consider supporting that, rather than a general operating request that in which it supports your broader work. So for those questions, let's see, I'm trying to think if there was maybe just one more in here that I haven't tackled. Yeah, let's see. We've got one more, so let me handle it here while we've got everyone on the line. In terms of helping women with these services, what if an organization is working towards affordable housing instead of shelter? Would that affect the application? This is also a great question. Thank you. What's really exciting about the collective giving model and this member-led grant making model, as well as with the strategy in place right now, is that the funding focus areas are broad, right? And they really cover the spectrum of lived experience of women and shelter, right? What does shelter mean? Well, we're really looking, again, this is why it's important for you as an organization to really help us understand how you see alignment with your work in our guidelines. You are the experts on the ground, understanding what are the housing priorities right now in the lives of women. Why is the work that you're doing timely, important, useful in community, something that's essential to the basic needs of women in this idea of shelter? And so I think, affordable housing certainly feels connected to that shelter space. So help tell that story, and that will help us in the member review process sort of see whether it's feeling strongly aligned, right? I don't want to be too prescriptive about what does and doesn't fit under those sort of buckets, because our community partners on the ground, you all on this call and your peers across the community, you understand better than we do how to define those issue areas. And so we're really looking for you to tell us that story of why this funding, why now for this work. Well, thank you so much for joining us at the lunch hour today, for your interest, for your excellent questions. I will say ahead of time for reaching out to me and to Cara ahead of time to ask more really good questions. This reminds me, I have a screen with our contact info on it. So I'm going to share that right now. Bear with me. But yes, please reach out. I'm really eager and excited to connect with you all. I have been in this role supporting WCA now for just almost a year. And so continuing to just really learn from the conversations that I have with those who are in the ecosystem doing this work to support women, something that is just so important to WCA, to our members like Takara, or like Erin, and to certainly my colleagues here at the Minneapolis Foundation like Takara. So thank you for what you do and for your time. Please reach out and I'll look forward to connecting with you.